my name's Marina. I'm a dyer and knitwear designer based in Wiltshire in the southwest of England. And in today's episode, I'm going to show you some of my projects from the last few weeks. And I don't know why it is, but even though I don't really do much gift knitting, I'm going to show you one project that's a gift knit. I do seem to end up really busy this time of year with lots of designs and samples that I can't show you. And I've been trying to work out why it is around sort of December, January that I end up with such a cluster of projects that are for sort of magazines and things. And I think it's just the way the seasons go with knitting. It's slightly different as a designer because you're working for very different lead times. And so often, you know, the summer is really quiet for designs and for yarn sales and things, and so that is when I'm often really busy with submissions for magazines and stuff. And the way that compounds is that I submit lots of things at once, a few of them get accepted, and then I'm working on them all at the same time. And while I'm working on lots of designs, I don't tend to prepare more submissions for things because it feels like I have lots on my plate, and then it gets quiet again, and it's just an interesting little cycle. But it allows me space around that for lots of dyeing and lots of self-published designs. But it does mean that I have knitted 3 things since the last time I spoke to you, and I can't, well no, I've knitted more than that, but I can't show you those 3 things because they are for a collaboration that you will find out about more probably later in the year. So that said, I am wearing, this one is a handspun knit from a few years ago. It's the Gown Cardigan by Irene Lynn. I love wearing it, but I won't 100% recommend the pattern just because it's not very size inclusive, and that's annoying. And then underneath it, I'm wearing my scrumper waistcoat. This one is in a little slightly cropped length, but my original sample I made in a larger size and a longer length. And yeah, that sort of takes me on to one of the things I'm making. I tend not to decide what order I'm going to talk about things in advance and just see where it goes. But the scrumper waistcoat I originally designed using Appledore yarn from John Arbon, and I have started a very tiny amount of progress on what is going to be a scrumper waistcoat. Now, I imagine this is going to be a while off because I have lots of other things to focus on before I probably get this one ready to publish. And it's going to take me a while to knit because I've got other things on as well. But basically, I had the yarn ready for this. So this is Appledore DK, and this colour is Sweet Coppin, which is one I've always loved. There are some really good colours in the range, a lot of them quite sort of moody and nuanced and really tweedy. But this kind of pinky reddy brown is just exactly up my street, and it's got quite a few streaks of green in it, which just give it like really good dimension. And so I've only made the tiniest bit of progress on it because I knew I was going to be casting on a project on New Year's Day for my Out of the Dark MakeAlong, which I will talk about shortly. But I found myself on New Year's Eve at home because can't go anywhere with the child. So sitting in for a quiet evening, but definitely wanting to stay up until midnight to watch the fireworks and things. And there was nothing in my hands that I wanted to knit, so I thought I would cast this on. So I cast on and did 4 rows, and that is the progress I made that evening, and since then I've been obsessing with a different project. But in the meantime, this is going to be really nice. There's not really anything to show you. The cardigan will be worked bottom up, same as the waistcoat. It has these little cabley details on the front and up the sides, and then on the sides there's a little moss stitch panel, and on the waistcoat it carries up around the armhole. But for the cardigan, instead, that moss stitch panel will continue along the underarm, and then you'll have a similar transition at the cuffs to what you have sort of at the hip here. So yes, I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be really, really lovely. And this is kind of surprisingly one of my most popular patterns, which is really nice. And it's just a nice little layering piece. I tend to wear this combination a lot because the really long cardigan kind of counteracts the slightly shorter body of the waistcoat. But yes, that's one I'm looking forward to, and I will be working more on once I finished the project that I have made a mildly ridiculous amount of progress on. But first I'll show you a couple of finished things, and so let's go with this one first. So this one I think I showed last time, and I wasn't nearly as far through it as I would have expected given how much knitting I've got done over the past few weeks. So this is a shawl. It's the Laoma Shawl, which I designed a few years ago, and I'm using a finer yarn than suggested in the pattern. It's written for a DK yarn, but being a shawl and the way the pattern works, you can kind of just use it with any weight of yarn and just keep going to use up whatever yarn you have. So I was doing a regular repeating stripe along this section, so I started here, and you just increase along one edge, and then I was using up one of the yarns faster than the other, and I wanted to make sure I used up as much of them as possible, so I did a while just using both of them, and then towards the end I swapped around the way I was doing the stripes. So I started using the browny pinky colour more than the grey. And so the grey yarn was spun from tops from Fernhill Fibre, and the brown was spun from bats that I made quite a few years ago, using a whole mishmash of fibres. And I've been wearing this a lot since because it's just really neutral. It doesn't sort of demand attention. It's quite big, so it's super cozy. I'm going to take this off almost immediately because I'm getting quite warm. But because it's at a slightly loose gauge, so as I said, I used a lighter yarn weight, but I used a bigger needle size than specified in the pattern. So it has quite a lot of air trapped in it, and it's fairly drapey, which I really like. It's just super comfy, and I like the way it sits. And yeah, it goes with most of my handspun things, which are becoming very, very predictable in colour, and I probably need to branch out slightly. So that one is the Laoma Shawl. I will put a link down the bottom for you for that one. And as always, all the patterns and things I mention will be in the description below. And if they're not, please give me a prod, because I might have forgotten to put them in, and I shall add them. So yes, that one I ended up just doing a lot of car knitting, and I've been doing more knitting, like seeing friends and family. If we're sitting around in the evening having drinks and things, I will just have my knitting on my lap. And I've started to get a bit better at knitting on car journeys because I do get a bit travel sick, and so in the past I've not really done much, but because both of the things I've been working on have been really quite simple, I can do it without having to look down at my hands too much, and so can mostly look forwards, and that helps. So yes, really keen on that one. I finished that one possibly on New Year's Day? No, it was a bit before. It was New Year's Eve. And then this one I finished before Christmas because it was a present for my son. I've talked about this one previously. It uses yarn that I frogged from a previous sample that I'd knitted. And it's got the same buttons as I've got on my waistcoat here, which are U buttons carved by Tom Dyson Woodworking. I love his buttons. I'm definitely going to be getting more of them. They're beautiful, and you know, the wood he uses each comes from a specific tree, and so it's all fairly local. He's down in Southampton, which is not super far from where I live. It's probably maybe an hour and a half, not quite 2 hours drive. I don't know. I've not actually been to Southampton from here. So yes, this is the Jones cardigan by Tin Can Knits. I have made a couple of modifications which I've talked about before, in that I used single moss stitch, like English moss or seed stitch, instead of double moss, and I just flipped the cables so that they're going in the opposite direction because I think that's nicer. But otherwise I followed the pattern exactly as specified. It's got a nice shawl collar. There is actually another button up here, but I find that when that one is done up it looks a bit sort of tight and unnatural around the neck. So I only do that one up when it's really, really chilly and he could do with an extra bit of warmth up there. And one thing I will say, so this yarn is, I can't remember if it's pure merino or if it's just like superfine Falklands wool. This is already pilling to all hell. I've taken so many bobbles off it and it keeps going. He's been wearing it for approximately 2 weeks. And this is the thing that I find with super fine worsted spun yarns. They just pill awfully, and when you've got a toddler who is quite hard on his clothes, I've got the cuffs rolled up because it's a bit big for him at the moment, so hopefully he'll have some time to grow into it. And it's already beginning to sort of felt around the cuffs. And I mean, it's lovely for him to wear, he really likes it. But yeah, the yarn just doesn't hold up as much as I would like. So people often recommend sort of super soft fine yarns for younger kids because they're worried that more rustic yarns might be scratchy. I would actually much rather knit for him in something like this because it's going to be so much more hard wearing. I didn't talk about the breeds in this one, partially because I always forget because it's a nice blend. 40% Devon Close Wool, 40% Romney, 20% Exmoor Blueface. And it's much more hard wearing. It's not as soft, it is a more rustic yarn. But my scrumper waistcoat that I've got knitted in that has lasted and lasted, and it looks pretty much like the day I knitted it, and I finished it well over a year ago, and I wear it a lot, whereas this has had occasional wear over a couple of weeks and is already looking jaded. So yeah, it's something I consider in my yarn choices. I don't think that super soft, like softness is not the first factor I look for in yarn. And with that yarn, I didn't choose it, it was allocated to me for a design, and it's probably just not one I would have picked out. But that said, it's non-superwash, it's pure wool, it is nice and soft for him, so yay. And okay, so that's 2 finished objects. I'm going to show you the fun one now. Now, I mentioned that I had casted on a new project on the 1st of January, and that is for the Out of the Dark MakeAlong, which is the MakeAlong I have run every year for the past few years, other than the year I was on maternity leave. And it is just a chance to bring some joy and fun to the darker months, which in the UK tend to be very cloudy and muddy, and it's all a bit grim. So I started doing this just as something to look forward to sort of after Christmas and New Year, while we're waiting for spring bulbs and things to come out. And so the idea is that you make anything using my yarn, patterns or fibre. So it can be a spinning project, you can knit something with my yarn, weave with my yarn, crochet with my yarn, or make something using one of my patterns. It can be with someone else's yarn. It's all cool. And share it either on Instagram using the hashtag OutOfTheDarkMal2024, and tagging me in the photo, because that makes it easier to find it on Instagram, because they've changed how hashtags work and it's all very annoying. There are full details on how it runs on my website, and I'll put a link to that below. And then it also runs on a specific channel in my Discord server, which is for my Patreon subscribers. And it's been so much fun. We've already got lots and lots of people making beautiful things, and I'm just so enjoying seeing what everyone's getting up to. So I shall show you my project. It's further along than I expected it to be. So I'm making a Lapidarium jumper using my Mendip DK yarn. And so yeah, well, this is where we are. I'm almost at the bottom of the body, considering I cast this on just over a week ago. I've been knitting slightly obsessively, but then I think I actually knitted this much in the course of a day and a half, going over for a family get-together, just in the car there and back, and then in the evening while we were doing quizzes and things. And I've used the colouring sheet. So this is the pattern. I don't usually use printed patterns, like, ever, unless they're in a magazine or something. But this one I've designed with a colouring sheet in it, so that probably can't see too well there, but it's so that you can choose, like, work out where you want to put your colours. And if you get the pattern before you get the yarn, you can print off multiple ones and colour it in different combinations, or the same colours but in different placements, just to try them out and see how they're going to go. And so I was fairly sure I knew which colours I was going to use and where I was going to put them on the yoke, but then was using it to decide whether I was going to do the red cuffs or the navy ones as specified in the pattern. Because I thought that the red might not be prominent enough, and I sort of wanted to draw attention to that. But seeing it knitted up, like, I'm really enjoying just that single band of red, and I think it's looking lovely. And so I think I will go for the navy cuffs. So you can see more of the navy in the short rows at the back. So that just raises the back neck, so it means you don't get that lumpiness around the front neck. And I'm just really pleased with how my colours have turned out. They're quite bold, for considering my usual palette is very earthy. That's sort of specific for my knitting, but I do wear a lot of this very bright kind of tomatoey red and, like, nice rich greeny blues. So the colours I'm using, the main body is Sheep Cloudy, so it's a naturally grey base. So this is undyed yarn, and so you can see it's got that nice sort of mild heathery look to it, which I just love. And then the navy is called Night, and the orange is called Fox. And those are both dyed on the grey base, so those are the cloudy ones. Because the idea with the yarn is that I dye the same colours on both the grey and the white base. And so these ones come out nice and moody, and then the colours dyed on the white base are bright and fresh and clear. So this one is teal, and then this one is ore. And I'm just so pleased with how they're working together. It's just really, really fun. So yes, this is the way it's going. I'm expecting it to be finished within the next week or two, but I do have some sample knitting to get on with. I've got a deadline in a few weeks' time, which I just need to finish off the sample for, and so I'll be making sure that I meet those before carrying on with that. But I've just been having so much fun with it, and as I say, I was knitting it in the car for a lot of the time, where I don't have to pay attention. Like the Mendip DK yarn in particular, like, it's woolen spun, so it's really round and springy and bouncy, and it knits up so nicely. And I know it's my yarn, so I'm sort of meant to like it. But it is literally my favourite yarn to knit with. It's just so much fun, and it just moves nicely, and it's really bouncy, so it doesn't put loads of strain on your hands or anything. And something I actually will say, which I forgot to mention, I don't often talk about needles because my needle collection is a bit of a mishmash, but I did talk a few months ago about the needles I use and sort of the decisions that go into that. So when I first started like knitting seriously and started designing my own things, I did order an interchangeable set of wooden needles. I got them from Knit Picks, and I didn't realise at the time that they'd be shipping from the USA, and so they took a long time to arrive, and then I realised that they aren't actually available in the UK. I think there are a couple of stockists or distributors in the UK, but they're a bit difficult to get hold of. And they are compatible with Knit Pro. And so for a long while I've been using Knit Pro when I've needed to replace needles, or when I've needed to get smaller ones. Like the interchangeable set only went down to a 3.5mm, but I used 3mm and 3.25 an awful lot. And the wooden Knit Pro ones I find just genuinely pants. They're just not good. The joins with the metal they're not smooth. You often find that they don't screw in nicely to the cables. The plastic tends to pull out of the metal connector. It's all just very frustrating. The wooden needles, like, yes, they're wooden, and yes, I should be more careful with them, but they snap so easily. And so I started replacing my smaller needles when I broke them with the Knit Pro Zings, which is what these are. So this is a 3mm that I'm using here. But I found that doing cables with these, because I don't tend to use a cable needle, I just transfer needles back, transfer stitches back and forth on the needles to rearrange them to make cables. And it kind of helps to have a nice sharp needle for that. And the Zings are just really blunt. And so I asked for some recommendations on Instagram and heard about, because I wanted them to be compatible with the cables and the needles I already had, because for smaller needle sizes I have Chalgus, so things below 3mm that don't work with the interchangeable set just because the connectors then are too wide. So for anything from like 2 to 3mm that I use for socks and for smaller things, I have Chalgus fixed circumference needles, but I didn't want to have to buy into the whole Chalgus set because they are just really quite pricey and there's not loads of budget to go around. And a few people recommended me new, well, what were at the time very new, Mindful needles from Knit Pro. And I got a couple of pairs from No Frills Knitting, which is over in Bristol. Meg and the team there are just great and lovely. And Meg was kind enough to send me like photo comparisons of the Mindful collection and some Novas and some Zings, like all in the same size, so I could compare the tips to see how sharp they were, because I wanted nice sharp needles. And I found that these ones, the Mindful ones from Knit Pro, not only are they nice and sharp, but the quality seems to be much better than the needles of theirs I've used before. And I've also just got, I've got some more needles because a load of my needles have vanished. I don't know where my set of interchangeables has got to, it's just gone. I've spent a few months looking for them, but I'm just having to, like, luckily my most used sizes were in my Notions bag that I use all the time anyway, so I still had those ones, but there are a couple that I need to use that have just vanished, so I'm just kind of backfilling. And I needed some more cables because I've got too many garments on the needles at the moment, as seems to be my want. And so I finally gone for some of the swivel cables, which I always thought were a bit of a kind of unnecessary luxury. But they're great, they're so much fun. So it means that the needles can twist independently of the cables, and I hadn't appreciated. So one thing I often do is transferring stitches from one cable to another using like a connector. So you can get ones that are two female ends that connect onto this cable, add on another needle. It's great for getting extra length if you need that for like trying things on and not having to transfer it to scrap yarn or something. And I also do it for when I put my sleeves on hold and transfer from these shorter needles that I have them on to a longer needle, because I magic loop and do them two at a time. But I find that when you screw one cable onto the other one, trying to twist the cable that's in amongst the live stitches, it means everything gets all eloquent as ever. But the swivel cables mean that that's just not going to be an issue, and I'm really excited about that because apparently these things are important. They've also got nice little end caps that are like little mushrooms. They're not like the big wide flat ones, which I think are fine, but when you've got them on sleeves that are on hold like this, they can be a bit intrusive, especially when you're working up here on the body. So yeah, I'm generally pleased. Like, none of this is sponsored or anything. It's been a long time since I've actually tried new needles and cables and things, and I'm actually impressed. Knitpro have done something good. Yay! So yes, I will, whenever I need to get more cables or fill in needle sizes that I no longer have, those are what I'm going to be using. And yes, I was just going to show you the original version of Lapidarium I did, because I wanted to go for quite a different vibe with this one. So this is my husband's one. I went for very cool colours, and these are actually all dyed on the Sunny base. So this white here is the undyed Sunny, and then the teal in here is the same colour as in here, but it pops so much more here because it's surrounded by both darker but also warmer colours, and so having that warm cool contrast makes it really stand out, whereas here it's all a bit more sort of chilled out. And so yeah, we've got the teal and the sheep, and then this main colour is night but dyed on the Sunny base rather than on the cloudy, so you can see how this is just a bit darker and moodier there. And then the colour that's on the hem and the cuffs and the sort of main contrast colour in the yoke is Yew, which is a nice sort of grey green, which I really enjoy. So that's Ben's one. It's a size 4 in the pattern, so it is rather too big for me. It's 2 sizes bigger than I'm knitting. And this looks quite diddy, but it will also loosen up when it's blocked, because that's what this yarn tends to do. Yeah, that's that one. I'm really excited by it, can't wait to wear it. Having so much fun even with the comparatively boring plain stockinette section, just because of like really nice yarn and needle combination. And now I'm going to show you some fluff. So recently I have been getting back into fibre dyeing after having mostly focused on yarn for quite a while. Like, I have quite a few different facets to this business because I like to be able to focus on different things. And with my yarn colours, I have a nice big repeatable range because I'm focusing on colour work and I'm also designing with my colours, and in most cases I'd like people to be able to get colours that I've used in previous things, and you know, it's nice to be able to go back to colours and know that they'll still be there. Even though, don't try to mix batches because hand-dyed yarn is not great for that. Yes, so I have my repeatable range, but they are very much a case of very specifically working out recipes, measuring things out to fractions of a gram, and it's all quite precise and not creative, basically. I've already created those colours, I've made a range that I really enjoy and might add to, because occasionally I just think there's a gap here and I want there to be a colour that isn't in the range yet, which is why the range just keeps getting bigger. But most of the creative work on those has already been done, and so production dyeing doesn't really scratch that itch. And so I have been dyeing more fibre recently, which I've really been enjoying. I'm doing them as limited editions, so they're not repeatable. I can be really creative. I don't have to worry about writing down numbers and everything like that. And so I've done a couple of these batches recently, and so I'm going to have another batch of hand-dyed fibre available probably within, probably next week. I haven't 100% decided, but I've got 5 colours so far, and I think I'd like to add at least a couple more. So it'll be a slightly bigger update than I've been doing previously, where I've done either 5 or 6 colours. So I don't have names for these yet, and I did actually have loads of fun with the last batch on one of my monthly Patreon Zoom calls, chatting with my patrons about like the colours and the vibes they were giving off, and like getting them to help me decide on colours. It was just so much fun, and like all of them were great names, and like that's because I'm slightly specific about the sort of vibe I want in my colourway names, and they just got it immediately. And so I love those calls. They're full of really nice people, and it's something I genuinely look forward to every month. So if you do want to join, have a look. I'll put a link for you both up in the corner and down in the description, because there are lots of lovely people in my Patreon and I really enjoy it. Yes, so colours. So this is the Skua blend, which is a custom blend made up for me by Wing & Wool Work. They're lovely to deal with. It's all British wool. It's breed specific, 5 different breeds. There is Teeswater, Jacobs, Cheviot, Dorset Horn and Manx Lochton. I always have to stop and think a little bit just to make sure I get them all right. And so in no particular order, I lie. In the order that I dyed them in, I'm going to show you the colours. So this one, I seem to end up doing really dark moody purples quite frequently, and I'm not sure why that is, because it's not a colour I tend to wear much, and I don't really like this sort of violet-y purple on its own. I'm just not that into, but mix it with like some more bluey shades and some warmer sort of pinky purples and some like really dark aubergine purple, then it just gets really nice. So I love this one. And with a lot of these, this is by far the darkest of this collection so far. But I am allowing some of the natural colour of the fibre to come through, and you'll see that a lot more in the colours I'm about to show you, because the natural colour of it is so pretty and it's got a lovely streaky effect, and I want to let some of that shine through. So then we've got this one, which I absolutely love. I'm doing so much of this kind of slightly cool faded green at the moment because I just really enjoy it. But then I've paired it with like some slightly intense reddy oranges, and there's a little bit towards the end there. And so with these you can kind of split them how you choose to and ply them up. And I do think there are some really good plying pairs in here, so you can get 2 braids of different colours and spin and ply them together, which is something that I really like doing. And yeah, I think is a really nice way to combine colours and get just something a little bit different. So there's that one, and like with these ones there's more colour on like one half of the braid, and then this is more calm. So you could do it so that you split it in the middle and spin one side as one bobbin, and then spin the other side as another bobbin, and then you'd have a fairly chilled out neutral single, and then that'll allow this one to really shine. But there are different ways to spin them, and that's one of the things I love about spinning. From most preparations, like you can make some creative choices about how you're going to spin them and create exactly the sort of yarn you want to, and it's loads of fun. And I've really been enjoying seeing more and more of you beginning to spin. Like, I know lots of people got spindles and wheels for Christmas. It makes me really happy. I've been spinning since the end of 2015. I'm going to have to at some point find my first ever yarn that I spun, because every so often I get it out to encourage people. Like when there's a glut of new spinners and some people are expressing either frustration or dismay at their attempts, I just like to remind people how truly terrible I was at spinning for the first few times I tried it. And while I'm not, you know, a master spinner, I'm a reasonably competent spinner and I can make yarn, and I've spun an awful lot of yarn and made garments out of it and things. But we all start somewhere, and I still look fondly on the first few projects I made with those early skeins of yarn. The very first one is still a horrific ball of like yellow slime coloured, well, but I keep it to remember. So yes, it's lovely to see people starting to spin, and if you are someone who is just beginning to spin, keep at it. Muscle memory will kick in, you'll get really good at it, and you'll one day miss the fact that you used to be able to spin chunky yarn, because you get thinner and thinner and now you're spinning super fine yarn, and it happens. It's lovely to see. This one I'm super keen on, shockingly, totally my vibe. Really nice, like zingy grassy greens, but then with like occasional pops of like yellowy orange. So a lot of these will spin, like I'm specifically going for not super high contrast, and it does help that the natural colour of the yarn like helps it to feel cohesive. But a lot of hand spun yarn can feel really like, it looks beautiful in the skein, but then you're like, what am I going to do with this? It's lots. And I don't necessarily like the really strong stripes you can get from hand spun yarn once they're knitted up into garments and things. And so I'm trying to dye ones that you can spin in a way that will be quite subtle and cohesive. And it will hopefully be then enjoyable to knit or weave or crochet or whatever into things that you're genuinely going to love. Again, very surprising colours. I was just going for lots of like very warm, calm, nothing too strong, like there are some stronger areas of colour here, but overall it's like fairly mellow. You've got lots of the natural sort of grey streakiness showing through. We've got some like slightly pinky tones, there are some yellowy areas. I really like this. I always end up doing something like warm and a bit autumnal feeling, just because they're some of my favourite colours to dye. And then it's not often I do a proper blue. So this, again, lots of the natural grey showing through, but a lot of the bits that are lighter actually have like a little overtone of turquoise. got some nice turquoisey bits, and then some much darker, like almost navy and royal blue sections. And this one, I think, once it's spun up, will feel really denim-y, because you've kind of got that grey and then the stronger blue. Yes. So, as I said, these will be going up on my website in probably about a week and a half's time. As I'm tending to do now, my patrons will get first access, so they will get access for 24 hours before everyone else. And that is just to try and like manage, because I'm not doing huge shop updates. It's just to try and manage things, and mean that if you're super keen on getting hold of some, it's a way to have more of a chance of doing so. And yeah, I think, oh no, I've forgotten to tell you about my hairband. It's the tiniest little thing. I'm trying to wear the hairband more because I designed it when I was growing my hair out. I'm still growing my hair out because the aim is for it to get like down here. But when it was like really annoying and all just in my eyes and stuff, I designed the hairband to keep it out of my face. And I do tend to prefer to keep my hair out of my face, like just to be able to see properly and not, I don't like having it tucked behind my ears. And so often I'll like either twist or plait it back. But where I'm using hair ties a lot, like I always have a couple on my wrist, I get a lot of breakage around the top here. And so I'm trying to remember to use the hairbands more, just to look after my hair a bit more, because it's more gentle on the hair. So this is the original one I did. It's the same, it's leftovers from this yarn that I spun for this cardigan. The pattern is the Ramosa headband. It's just a super cute little, very easy pattern. It uses the tiniest amount of yarn. I think this one was like 12 grams. This one was probably even less. It's not specific to yarn weight. It's just if you use a finer yarn, you'll end up with a skinnier headband. If you use a chunkier yarn, you'll end up with a wider one. And it's worked end to end. You've got a little ribbed section there, so it's not super bulky at the base of the neck. And it's just grafted at the end, so you can make it to the length you want it to. This one is actually a little bit loose, like it's got a bit of positive ease, which means it doesn't stay in place very well. So I made this one second and it stays in place much better. So I might try felting this one a little bit. May cheekily chuck it in the washing machine and see what happens. And so it does help to have a fair bit of negative ease, because it stretches out, just to make sure that it's going to stay in place in your hair. So that's a super cheap pattern. It's £2. And if you're wanting to join the Out of the Dark Make-Along, but don't necessarily have the time to commit to a big project, you can make a little headband and join with one of those. So yes, do join the Make-Along if you want to. It's lots of fun. It's all really nice seeing people's projects showing up on Instagram and on the Discord group for patrons. Like part of the point of the Make-Along is to make me happy, but also to provide inspiration for other people on like projects and seeing different colour combinations for patterns. Like I'm seeing a lot of different lapidariums being knitted up. Just in so many different colour combinations, and it's really, really fun. So if you would like to join, I'll put all the details in a link and you can read more about it and decide if you want to be part. And there will be prizes. I'm waiting for confirmation on a couple of things, and I'll be sharing some of the prizes in the next few weeks over on Instagram and on the Discord. Yes. I believe that is all I have to share with you for this month. Yes, so we're going to see how things end up looking for future episodes of the podcast, because we're about to, like, next week we have builders starting work in the house. Everything is going to be chaos. I'm hoping I'll still be able to carve out my little corner of wool and still be able to film without too much disruption. And we'll see. Oh, another thing I was going to ask, actually, if anyone would be remotely interested in seeing some of our renovation work. It won't be yarn related, but it will be like renovating an old house. I would do it as separate videos, so it wouldn't be part of the podcast. Although if it ends up being properly chaos, I might just chuck in some scenes so you can see what I'm working around. I'd love to hear if that would be of interest to anyone. So you can kind of see what's going on behind the scenes while I'm trying to work amongst walls being knocked down and things. So yes, if you would like to catch up with me in between podcast episodes, you can follow me on Instagram. There is my newsletter, which is where, if you're not going to join as a patron, newsletter subscribers get next dibs on shop updates. And so I've got the Fibre coming up soon. There will probably be at least a couple more colours there. I'm going to be dyeing up lots more yarn of some of my regular colours. I might do a couple of limited edition ones in advance of Unravel, which is towards the end of February. I will be exhibiting at Unravel, so if you are UK based, I'd really love to see you there. And yeah, it's been lovely chatting with you, and I hope to catch you next time. Bye.